Hey, what's up, folks? Pennsylvania Republican who ran against Dr. Oz, Kathy Barnett, is joining the show today to talk about this article I found about the Great Reset in Canada and also what she sees with the Republican Party and what she learned running for office. But first, to refresh your memory, here's one of the truth bombs she dropped on stage.
We need people who are going to be fighters. We don't need people who are globalists in the way that they have lived their lives and ran their business. And although I think you're a magnanimous individual, but you and your corporation, McCormick, you are a part of the WEF, the World Economic Forum. You, as well as you, Oz, they're both part of the World Economic Forum. This is a very serious organization that has a mindset of pushing globalism and ESG, environmental social governance.
Okay, thank you.
And we need to be mindful of that.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. 15-second quick response, sir, Mr. McCormick.
It's going to be a great show, folks. Dream Rare Podcast starts now.
It's the Dream Rare Podcast. Welcome to the show. The way to get the news at the desk or on the road. Let's go. God is great and success in our control. The world is crazy, but we get better from obstacles.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of the Dream Rare Podcast. I'm here with Kathy Barnett. Thanks for joining, Kathy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I love that clip. When I saw it, I was watching and I was like, all right, well, this is getting interesting. So thanks for, dropping some truth bombs and definitely being, in my view, the best candidate. I don't vote in Pennsylvania, but I would have voted for you.
Thank you. I have to agree with you. I think I was the better of the candidate. I think many people here in Pennsylvania, if you guys are paying attention, now we have John Fetterman as our senator. I think a lot of people are kind of, regretting whether they did not vote for me or just a whole lot of stuff that went on here in Pennsylvania. So I think a lot of other people are thinking the same thing.
Yeah, Fetterman is a unique disaster. Watching him talk, it's just like, wow, it's interesting. Before we get to the first story, I guess, just after doing a lot of stuff, what did you learn running for office, working within the Republican Party, trying to go against people like Dr. Oz endorsed by Trump and, some of the maybe establishment going for the other guy? Like any takeaways before we start that just like you're inspired to share?
Yes, I have a lot, right? So I'm gonna truncate it a little bit. But before I do, let me just say something about the whole John Fetterman and how sad it is when you see him on these videos and you hear him trying to speak and you hear he is struggling to think. You recognize something is not functional with him right now from a cognitive perspective, less elevated beyond above John Fetterman, because we also see the exact same thing with Joe Biden. These are not bugs. These are features with the Democrat Party. And I am, very concerned that we're going to see more Joe Bidens and John Fettermans as we see who Democrats put out, because I don't think it's a glitch in the system when you're looking at the type of people they are picking and pushing and elevating. I think this is the plan. It's much easier to control someone when they are cognitively disabled versus someone who has their wherewithal about them. So I think that's one of the things that we see. And I just want, and since you brought it up, I wanted to just kind of put a little spotlight on that. What you're seeing with John Fetterman, Joe Biden, I think we're going to see more people like that being rolled out from the Democrat Party. So just want to throw that
I guess
out there.
my question to you about that is, why is that? Because, as much as obviously John Fetterman is a joke, he never should have ran. And I think he needs like help, clearly, like not just physical help, but mental help or whatever. He has a lot of issues. We'll just say that. Yeah. The Democrats will vote for anyone that's not Republican, but at the same time, they'll do the same thing on the Republican. Because if you could find me like a brain dead person that has my policies over the Democrat policies, I might. And I don't think Dr. Oz was that brain dead. Obviously, he's a celebrity, he's famous, but I feel like from someone that looked at Trump when he ran in 2015, and he seemed inspired, right? Like he was called to run. Like, I'm tired of this mess. Oz, nice guy. Like I know people that know him and say he's a super nice guy, but he didn't have that, and he didn't have that real energy to run. So I guess, what do you think the Democrats are going to run more people like that because they know that the left-right paradigm is so divisive that people will literally vote for a rock with a brain over the other side?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you have a number of things working, both on the Democrat side as well as the Republican side. As it relates to the Democrats, listen, there's a lot of bobbleheads over there, right? Like whatever, they just all kind of move lockstep and do whatever they're told. You definitely have that aspect of it. But I believe as things get more and more challenging for us as a nation with the flood of illegals, with this inflation. A lot of it is very intentional. It's as a direct result of very poor leadership that we're getting from the Democrat Party as well as from the Republican Party, because I'm a firm believer Democrats could not do half the things they're doing if Republicans weren't complicit. So I no longer, I think a lot of what we're seeing, they have us focusing on the D's and the R's. But it really, if Vivek talks about this a lot, it is those who are pro America, who want to see our country do well. And those are people from both sides of the aisle versus those who are anti American, who do not like this country very much. And they want to see the continued demise of this nation, or, like they just don't care. It's all about themselves. So I think when you break up, what we're looking at, those who are for this country versus those who are against this country, you get a better sense of who we of what's going on in our country, how this nation is truly being divided. So stop focusing so much on just the D's and the R's and allowing them to get us all fighting each other. It's really pro America versus those who are anti American. I think if you look at it like that, it's a little bit more true to form. But again, when you're looking at Democrats, yes, you have a lot of bobbleheads. When you're looking at on the Republican side, one of the reasons why, there are many reasons why Oz did not prevail in the general election. One of them, yes, he's a nice guy, met him, spent a lot of time with him and his wife while we were on the campaign trail. Really nice people. Yet he's not a Republican, and certainly wasn't a MAGA, right? Certainly wasn't a America First. There was nothing in his background prior to him saying he wanted to run that would have given anyone any kind of inclination that this man aligns with America First values. So one, we need to pick better candidates, not just these plastic individuals who look like the typical Republican, but people who actually are reflective of the values of the base itself. And the second thing, and I would just pause right here, is that, again, I thought it was so interesting when we were running in that Senate race. I was looking at, John Fetterman and the Democrats as they were running, and I was waiting on pins and needles for Democrats to start, exposing all of their dirty little secrets, because we know they got a lot of baggage, right? And yet they didn't do it. It wasn't as nasty as I knew it could have gotten. But then you look over here at the Republican side, and there was a lot of lying. There was a lot of lies. There were, it was just got really, really nasty, and especially in those last 5 days, the Republican leaders within the Republican Party, you cannot pounce and trash your candidates in the primary, and then once the primary is over, say, okay, everybody, let's come together, let's lock arms and kumbaya, let's remember Reagan's 11th commandment, and let's just all be friends and think that that is going to be enough. And especially not with what they did to me in the race, because what they failed to realize, the momentum behind me really had very little to do with me and more to do with the base and the energy. Just to give your audience some perspective, just between Dr. Oz and Dave McCormick, just those two alone, there were many others who are writing $10 million checks out of their personal checking account. But just between Dr. Oz and Dave McCormick, they spent $60 million just in my primary. I spent $1.6 million. I had 3 full-time people on my team, a driver, a scheduler, and 1 field director. And everyone else, hundreds of people, were volunteers. And so that energy that everyone saw, that enthusiasm, that momentum, it wasn't because I was out here buying people's loyalty or putting up slick TV ads trashing my opponents. It was the people. And so when you have people like, Mitch McConnell and and Donald Trump coming in and thinking they're pouncing on me, they were really pouncing on their base. And so there's a lot of wreckage left once that primary was over. And it was extremely difficult to now call those people back to the finish line and say, let's get behind Dr. Oz when you've trashed your own base. So I think those are the two things Republicans can do. One, pick better people. And two, don't demoralize your base, but instead energize and get behind that momentum.
Right. I mean, Trump supporters, Trump influencers, like the voters, everybody was behind you, but Trump himself wasn't. And this is a trend that I keep seeing where he's just on the opposite side of his base, and everybody kind of just makes excuses for it. But I want to talk about that more in a second. I just want to get into the main story, and then we'll get right back to that stuff because I got a lot to ask. So this is an article. One of my followers said, "Hey, anomaly for," I don't know if you're going to see this, but in Canada, CBC, which is partially funded by the government, it's their like a state-funded newspaper. They keep writing these articles about the Great Reset, and it's glorifying it. And I looked at some of the articles, and I was like, wow, because a couple months ago, a year ago, it's like the Great Reset is a conspiracy theory. Then the Great Reset is literally the name of something at World Economic Forum, which you talked about the World Economic Forum and your opponent's ties to them. And now they're just full bloated, like, yo, capitalism, we need to rethink it. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the article and just get your response to it. So this is CBC.Canada. The article title says, "Can the Great Reset really create a gentler, more equitable capitalism?" When Mark Benoif, the co-founder and CEO of the software giant Salesforce, arrived at the annual meeting at the World Economic Forum, he didn't look like any other billionaires gathered there. Instead of a cashmere sweater vest under a smartly tailored blazer, Benoif was wearing a dark suit and a black tie. Asked to explain his wardrobe choice, Benoif said, "I'm at a funeral for capitalism here in Davos." So they're starting it out with some guy saying, we're killing capitalism here. And I'm not going to bore everybody with the whole article, but basically they're talking about the debate between libertarians and I would say more leftists between capitalism with compassion versus just straight up capitalism. And they're trying to basically paint the picture that the Great Reset is the kinder, more thoughtful, more humane version of it. What do you think about what they're doing over there and that?
Yeah. Not just over there, it's here among us as well. A couple of thoughts. It's interesting how those things that were once touted as conspiracy theory are now being pushed as mainstream and really chic and cool. And so let's pay attention to that. One, it's not over there, it's right here in our country. So if you think it's over there, it's not, it's here as well. But also, this is something that Vivek talks about a lot. They can only sell what the American people are open to buy. And so when you see, all of these different things, right, whether we're talking about little girls being encouraged to cut off their healthy breast or little boys being chemically castrated to an open border, these things only happen if there is a market for it. And one of the reasons why there's a market for all of these things, whether we're talking about the centralization of our money, which is a huge impetus on the reason why Canada can become a little bit more upfront and saying the quiet parts out loud, is because they, one of the things Vivek was talking about at the Bitcoin conference is that free money and free speech is necessary for this kind of constitutional republic that we have right now. It's not just free speech, but it's free money as well. So the reason why these things are happening is, again, because there's a market for it. And there's a market for it because as Americans, we no longer know what it means to even be an American. If you ask most people, what does it mean to be an American? They give you kind of this deer in the headlights look, right? But what does it mean to be an American? And it's because we have forgotten our identity is the reason why there's a market for it. And so now we're just kind of flowing with the wind of whatever big media, big corporate big boardroom corporations tell us what it means, what Target tells us what it means to be an American, then we're like, okay, well, this must be what it means to be an American. Or what some government entity tell us what it means to be an American. Okay, yeah, well, that must be what it means to be an American. But it's not. We just did, right before I jumped on your show now, we just had a team meeting with Vivek kind of taking the charge of reminding everyone the purpose behind his campaign. Why are we running? I mean, is it because we have nothing to do, nothing better to do? Because we just want to be a part of the clog, part of the will? It's not. Our purpose is to revive a national identity. And the best, there are many ways you can go about doing that. The best way, Vivek, myself, and many others believe we can go about reviving our national identity, what does it mean to be an American, is by winning in this 2024 primary election and then going on to win the general election. That's step one in reviving our national identity. And so a lot of these things that you're seeing, whether we're talking about the WEF, this great reset, this open border, none of these things are happening organically. It is all a part of a big plan that now is no longer a conspiracy theory. So I guess people like you and I can start saying these things out loud now. It's all a plan. None of this is organic. It is very intentional, and it is happening not across the ocean, but it's happening right here in our country. And so, one of the reasons why it's happening again is because we don't know what it really means to be an American. I'd love to talk to you about that as well.
Yeah. So there's this old quote I read from Dick Gregory, rest in peace. And I can't think of the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of, I buy all these newspapers every week and I read them. I don't read them because I believe them. I read them to look for the cracks in the matrix and see what they're saying. Basically, that's the gist of it. And with this article, it was interesting because I read a little bit about it. And sometimes people say, don't look at that, don't read that, it's fake news. And for the most part, I agree. Sometimes there's truth. A lot of times it's fake, but I'm trying to see what they're doing and see where they're going, because they'll really explain who they are and what they're thinking in those articles. And in this article, it really made me think why Republicans, conservatives, libertarians around the world are losing this kind of debate. And it's because when I hear this debate about capitalism and equitable capitalism or socialism, the left will say, well, we're doing something that's kind. You can't just sell anything for $1 and hurt people. And the right often says the wrong thing, which is, no, just sell whatever. And in my view, that's actually ruining America. Even though we're pseudo-capitalist, even though you saw with the lockdowns and stuff, socialism prevailed, big pharma socialism, et cetera. But you really shouldn't just sell. Like, if you were my neighbor, I shouldn't just sell you something that I knew was bad for you for money. That's actually a terrible thing. Yes, capitalism, libertarianism is better than socialism, but we can't just be scamming each other all the time. So this is if I said this message to a socialist or a left winger, they would be like, okay, that guy has a soul. But when you have the left saying, we're the nice ones, we're going to do this equitable capitalism, and the right just comes through and they say, no, we just need to sell. They look stupid and they look fake and they look like they're the mean ones. So I think capitalism is more, I would say kind than socialism and government tyranny. But you have to explain to people that you're not willing to just sell something for $1. For an example, McDonald's is an American company. In Europe, the product is actually better because they have better regulations for food, and they don't allow just certain garbage like dough conditioners that are disgusting. So why is an American company selling more poisonous products to America? I'm not going to say full-blown poison, but it's not as healthy in my view. In another country, why are they treating others better? And that's the story of America. We're treating other countries, giving them money, right? Going around the world, just throwing our dollars at Ukraine, at Israel, at, Mexico. I mean, name a country we're not. So I kind of see that as why we're going to lose this narrative, is because they're posing as the kind ones, even though they're not. And we kind of step into the trap of like, no, we're the jerks. And it's like, we're not. We're trying to stop global tyranny, and I would say evil disguised as kindness.
Yeah, and I think we put a spotlight on that last part, right? Disguising evil as kindness, because none of the things that Democrats have said or proposing, we could just look at Just go back the last 3 years from, the COVID lockdown. There was nothing kind about that, forcing people to take an experimental jab, whether they wanted to or not. There was nothing kind about that. They said we were all in this together. And yet, during that exact same time that they were closing businesses, destroying economies, I was talking to people who were getting a 35% pay cut. And yet during 2020, that exact same time when people were taking, the average American was taking 35% pay cut or just getting fired altogether because their industry was being destroyed with these lockdowns, our nation increased the number of millionaires by 30%. That doesn't sound like we're all in this together, right? And those were as a result of primarily Democrat-led mandates of closing down schools. Look at the number of children, there were, especially those in inner cities, those where the schooling is already poor, to say the least. Take 3 years, 2 years of them being locked out or being on the computer. And that's a gap that they would never be able to recover. There's nothing kind and equitable about any of those things, right? So there's a tremendous amount of hypocrisy in what Democrats sell as, and again, I almost get choked on the word saying Democrat versus Republican, because I recognize it's not just D's and R's. D's couldn't do what they're doing if R's weren't complicit in that, right? But I don't know how we want to segment it, but those who are anti-American or anti-real equity or equality of opportunities, those particular people, it's a lot of hypocrisy. It sounds nice, it sounds pretty, right? Take the jab so you don't kill granny. Yeah, it sounds pretty, but then you have, the right, those on our side of the aisle, just what they did with me. Instead of coming alongside me, or at least just staying out of it altogether and allowing the people to decide, they come in with their own agenda and they begin to pounce and trounce and drown out anyone who's not in lockstep with their own personal agenda. I think that was another thing that I learned throughout all of this, is that those on our side, the ones we would say who are on our side in the Republican Party with an R next to their name, there are many in leadership who are not as concerned with winning as you and I may be concerned with winning. They have a different set of priorities. They would like to win, but what is of higher priority to many of them is control. They want control. And even if they are in control over a shrinking pie, as long as they're in control, right? And so you see that kind of playing out on the Republican side of things as well. We're not all in this together on the Republican side. We're not all about winning. We're not all about a red wave. That's the only reason you can look at. That's the only answer to when you're looking at, we should have had a red wave. And yet, we're a bunch of losers on our side of the aisle. How does that happen? Except for the fact that we're not all prioritizing winning in the exact same way. And so those are some of the things that we have to kind of put our mind around and begin to look at where we are with open eyes.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because obviously I'm not one of these people. I call out Republicans more than Democrats sometimes because I consider it our side and I'm like embarrassed. But like you said, the Democrats are objectively worse. It just comes to this question of, are the Republicans fighting and falling short, or are they just putting on a show and secretly kind of just blowing it purposely? On that note, I want to read a few things and then I want to get your reaction, because you know me, like we never spoke. This is the first time we've spoken face to face or Zoom to Zoom. But, I would say I don't live in Pennsylvania. I just was inspired to share a lot of clips of Kathy and try to help her, because Dr. Oz McCormick were stale. She's talking about World Economic Forum. I could tell that she had more energy, more authenticity, even talking to you now. So I was really pushing these videos. And then I saw Trump not only endorse Dr. Oz, but really take a hardline stance against you when the base of Trump and the base of conservatives was behind you, by trying to say people backing you were globalists, etc. And it didn't make sense to me, because I was like, why would globalists back the candidate speaking against globalism when the other two are way more tied. And I'm just going to read these two things, and then I'm going to read a Trump True Social in my best Trump voice. Hopefully people don't get offended. And then I just want to get your reaction to it, because obviously you know where I stand. I liked you a lot better than them. So The Hill reported that Club for Growth endorsed you and dropped $2 million on ads. And then it was reported that Trump was scrambling to fend you off in the Pennsylvania Senate primary race, because everybody knows he endorsed Oz. And here's what he said on Truth. He said, "The Club for Growth, No Growth, is a globalist group that I've been taking to the cleaners for years. We worked together for a period, and they couldn't get away from China, Europe, and America's other parts unknown. They know I won't play that game. I'm America first all the way. That's the only way we will make America great again. Ron DeSanctimonious, who I have made governor in both primary and general, is also a globalist, and so are his donors. Jeb Low Energy Bush was next to him last week. Check passed." So, Trump came out and he said he was trying to take a hit at DeSantis, but I remember I was like, wait, and I looked at who the Club for Growth endorsed, and I was like, honestly, they endorsed better candidates than Trump did. So what do you think about that? Him trying to take a jab at that, and also kind of working against you. He didn't want you to win the primary.
Yeah. Listen, I appreciate what Donald Trump did when he came into office. And I have, I'm angry about how the administrative state was weaponized against him, not just him, but again, they thought they were just weaponizing themselves against Donald Trump. But I recognize it's not just Donald Trump they're weaponizing against the people as well, and specifically about half the country that was voting for him. And so, so for me, I had to decide very early on, after my primary race, if I was going to become bitter and just put a spotlight and just be really negative and critical about everyone. I refuse to be bitter. My disposition is to be one filled with hope. And I believe we must be very hopeful as our nation is in a precarious situation. And I don't believe it's a hyperbole to say, to begin to ask the question, will America survive? I believe I used to say we're about to lose our country, but in fact, I believe we've actually lost many aspects of our country. How else can you surmise where we are when we're told to applaud 15-year-old girls getting their healthy breasts cut off, right? Clearly we've lost some things in our nation, and clearly we need to begin to think differently. I'm thinking about Albert Einstein. One of his quotes is that if a different way of thinking is needed if we are to survive and move to higher levels. I can't think of anything more fitting than a need to begin to think differently. And I'm exhausted of playing the blame game. I will recognize the facts, as I've done earlier, that it was Donald Trump tapping many within the quote unquote MAGA movement to pounce on me and to just try to douse the energy and the enthusiasm and the momentum that was behind my race. I put a spotlight on that because we should not forget those things, and we should hold our feet to the fire and expect more from our leadership. So I will do that. But then, it's just exhausting to try again to go back and or even to go forward, as we try to pick our side. That's one of the things we do in the Republican Party, is that we obsess over the who, right? Who's your guy? Who's your girl? Who are you going to vote for? And then we split like the dividing of the Red Sea. And then we begin to fight each other like blood and Crips, right? This my guy, this your guy.
Right.
And we don't allow these people to vie and for our vote, to woo us and to earn our vote. We just give it to them. And then we begin to beat up on one another like gang members. In Crenshaw. So I know I threw out a lot of analogies there, but that's how my mind thinks when I think about how we spend so much time in our party fighting one another and not figuring out what do we believe, why do we believe it, and which person who's running for leadership is going to come close to giving us the kind of America that I believe we want and we deserve in many regards, especially those who are coming up behind us. How do we give them an America that is not teetering on survival or not? And I think that's going to take a lot of work.
I think that's a classy answer. I guess let me reframe it because I respect that and I agree with you. I like policy debates and even, jokes and stuff, but I think even Trump versus DeSantis has gotten really toxic with the influencers, with the insults that are it's reminds me of what the media said about Trump, like, like he's making it very personal, but I'll reframe it to say this cuz as somebody, I'm not looking to drag people down. I'm looking to get results, but I'm starting to question who are these people and
Yeah.
do they even really share my values? So, for example, this is the reframe that I'm going to have for you for that question is why do you think that Trump chose Dr. Oz? Because even before I knew about you, I know somebody who knows Dr. Oz and they can't say enough about him as a person. So I don't dislike him as a person. I've heard he's a great person. But I'm looking at his Twitter feed and I'm not digging like back to 2012. I'm looking at 2020, 2019, recent stuff on his show. He fell for the Jussie Smollett thing. I think he had him on. His stances on everything. I'm like, this guy just seems kind of like a liberal. And the way he's talked, he didn't sound inspired like Donald Trump did in 2015. He sounded like somebody just reading a script. So I'm thinking to myself, why is this wealthy, successful guy who used to be liberal a year ago, why is he running for office? And more importantly, why is Donald Trump, who's supposed to be this like outsider leader, how come everybody in the Trump movement can see that Dr. Oz is like basically a liberal?
Yeah.
How does everyone see it except for Donald Trump? And I guess without being too like nasty about it, I appreciate your
Yeah.
class. Why did Donald Trump choose him? Because these are the things as a voter, it's like I'm like just baffled that that was his choice.
Yeah, I've never sat down with Donald Trump and had this discussion. Why in the world did you vote or endorse Oz? Clearly, I'm the America First candidate that you should have gotten behind. I would love to have that conversation. Maybe. I don't even know if I care at this point. But, so no, I never sat down. I don't know the inner workings or the motivations behind that particular choice. I can guess at them like a lot of other people have done. But for those who say they are in a place of leadership, we need to spend time with our base, and that is what I do. That's what I did very well. I don't think anyone has ever done what I did. We got almost a third of the vote. Over 330,000 Pennsylvanians came out and voted for me. And this was in spite of Donald Trump and many other influencers telling them not to. On Friday night before my election, they were saying I was a member of Black Lives Matter. By Monday, they were saying I was marching with the Proud Boys. I was like, I can't be both people. You're going to have to pick one. Either I'm Black Lives Matter or I'm over here with the Proud Boys. But they didn't care. They were just throwing out whatever and to see what would stick. But the base and my base is perhaps almost exclusively Donald Trump's base, right? That MAGA base. And yet again, I think a lot of the credit, yes, I was out there. We were spending 1,500 miles every single week for 15 months, knocking on every door, getting in front of as many people as I possibly could. But I could not have done what I did if it wasn't for the base. The base is smarter than many of our leadership will give them credit for. And although they had Donald Trump and many other influencers telling them not to vote for me, they refused to be denied because, like you, they saw that that at best, at best, Oz is a Democrat. At worst, he is a liberal who does not care that much about this country. And so they saw that and they just refused to be denied. They refused. They wanted something authentic. They saw something authentic because I was listening to their voice and I was reflecting what they wanted. And I think our leadership would do it'd be a very good exercise for them to take some time out and to spend time with the base and to listen to the base. That's the other thing I saw, spending a lot of time behind the curtains, walking with our quote unquote leadership. I have never seen a party of leaders, not all of them, but a good number of our own leadership in the Republican Party who have such disdain for their base. They know they need the vote. And so they will come and they will smile and they will take photo ops with us, and give us a little bit of their time. But the moment they secure our vote, they kick us down the road like a bent up, rusty can. And then all of a sudden, their values begin to evolve from the values that they said they were going to espouse. I mean, how else do you get these people in leadership? You know, they know we're in a time of an inflationary period. They know this is going to get worse before it gets better. And yet they do the dance. They wait till the eve of the debt ceiling cancellation, and then they raise the debt ceiling, right? Without cutting much of anything at all. They recognize we shouldn't be sending more money to Ukraine. They recognize we should be securing our own borders before we go and secure someone else's borders. And yet, not they go on Fox News, they beat their chest, they say, click on this link to donate, and then they move on with life. They're not reflecting our values whatsoever. And again, I think that because I was speaking it very clearly, people saw that and they're looking for something authentic. I think that's the other reason why Vivek has had such a meteoric rise in the poll, is because once more the people now for the nation is going to have an opportunity to select someone who is authentic, who is a man of integrity, and who is saying what we are all thinking. So here's your second chance, America, to get someone in office who will actually reflect your values.
So I'm not a politician. I'm a citizen. I'm a hip hop artist, but I'm a news analyst. That's what I'm probably best known for, is analyzing the news. So it's tough in this day and age, just like politics. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people, they'll blow with the wind of where the donor class or the social, pressure is. And same with a lot of my peers, they kind of act like they're activists, or act like they're maybe like truth tellers, but really they've just become the same type of politician, that does that. Where with me, it's a little tough because I'm just trying to analyze and be as honest as I can. And when it comes to Trump versus DeSantis, and you're talking about Vivek, or however you say his name, we'll talk about that in a little bit as well, because I don't know much about him. You could tell me. I've always analyzed that the reason DeSantis even ran and the reason that DeSantis went from here to here, like it's not random. It's the same reason why you gave Dr. Oz a run for his money with way less money, is because you were more authentic and you were speaking what people wanted to hear. It's not rocket science. You were just more interesting and honest. So with DeSantis, Trump, he's not, in my view, the same energy that the base had in 2018 is not the same in 2022, because as Trump decided to run around the country, Newsmax, Fox News, overselling this vaccine, saying it's one of the greatest achievements of mankind, it saved 100 million views, DeSantis turned corner and started speaking against the mandates and prioritizing that. So whether you like Trump or DeSantis more in that conversation, that's really why he got more popular. It was his leadership against COVID that made him popular on a national scale. That's just the truth. That's why people started listening to him. That's why people started liking him more than Trump. So to be fair, you look at that and you say, okay, well, how do I, counter that? But what I've seen from Trump is this sense of entitlement, where it seems like no matter what he does, like, DeSantis is on stage with Jeb Bush. Fair criticism. But Trump's on stage with Lindsey Graham. But people don't want to mention that, where it's like, this sort of thing of like, I deserve your vote, I deserve this. And it's like, why though? Like, I'm not a robot. Like, if you tell me to vote for Dr. Oz and I live in Pennsylvania, I'm still voting for you. I don't care what Trump says. If Trump oversells the vaccine, I don't care. So it's getting to the point where I understand your theory, because I think getting too ugly and sloppy with it is a flaw for Republicans. But at the same time, I do feel like that Trump is not being challenged at all. And I don't even see him as my leader anymore. It's like, how could I look up to somebody that has dumber opinions than me on almost everything now? And even all the supporters, it's the same analogy that I saw with you versus Oz. It's like Trump's on the wrong side of 99% of his base. So why not? Why don't I should just follow Trump supporter pages. They give more insight than even Trump himself. So how do you feel about that? Where do you draw the line of like, trying to evolve the party and standing with your values and doing journalism versus, not getting so sloppy that it ends up like beating each other up? And I'll say this too, is, not to just dunk on it a little more, but to me, the person who's being the sloppiest with the personal attacks is Trump. I think he's absolutely reckless. Just, he'll punch at anyone for his own personal personal gain and doesn't care like what trail he leaves behind. So I'm more just focusing on things, and I see him creating kind of a mess.
Yeah. When I came out of my senatorial race, I mean, I know I'm going back there, but it's really just for a point of reference, right? I mean, they dragged me those last 5 days, and they were just nasty. And it wasn't CNN that did it to me. It was our own side who did it to me. It was those who say they're MAGA and that, they're conservative, America first. It wasn't even the rhinos who was doing it. It was those who typically walk around saying that they are conservative. And so I think the first day, and this happened in the last 5 days of the race, they knew I didn't have the money or the resources to counter each of their attacks, right? So I had to keep going before the people. And again, the people were amazing. The people here in Pennsylvania, so many of them, I didn't have the money to buy their vote. I didn't have the money to go around all of the points that were being said about me. But they wanted something better. And I believe that what we saw here in Pennsylvania, this almost third that broke away from their typical America First type candidate to vote for me, I believe that that's reflective of the nation. I believe there's a growing pool within our own base that are being red pilled, who are looking around and saying, what in the world is going on? And they're beginning to learn to think for themselves and not be so gullible. We do have an aspect within our base who are gullible, and those in leadership, they recognize it. And instead of educating these people to not be so gullible, they take advantage of them. They're useful. Their gullibility is useful for them. And and that was very upsetting for me to see that, because I don't want to see people be exploited. But I remember coming out of that, and again, I faced a hard question: are you going to become bitter? I had every reason to be bitter. If anyone had a reason to be bitter, leaving my family out there, working my behind off, trying to get in front of the people, and then to be lied on by my own base. I mean, I certainly had reasons to be bitter, but I chose not to. And for me, I pivoted and spent about 6 months in the book of Isaiah. It took me about 6 months to get through all of that and began to refocus my attention on where my hope really comes from: Jesus, love him, and began to spend my time with my family, because I think faith and family is very important. And I began to remember, or just to remind myself, that this is the greatest country that has ever existed. And I get the wonderful privilege at this point in history to fight for her, and to stand up, to plant my flag in the ground, on the parcel of truth that I've discovered, and to stand and to be bold and to show people what courage looks like. These are the decisions that I made, right? And so that leaves very little room to be bitter and to be angry, because I'm busy, right? I got a lot of things taking up my time throughout the day. And I think that that's what Vivek does so well, is helping Americans remember why this is the greatest nation in the world, reviving our national identity of God, family, country, which would be in patriotism, as well as individual merit, right? Those are the things that have made our country so great. Those are the values that have to be revived in our nation. That's the identity we are missing. And that's where he spends the overwhelming majority of his time. That's where I chose to spend my time, coming out of that, brutal battle, that contentious battle for Senate race. And so that's how I mean, honestly, I can't be more honest with you. Those are the lens. That's the lens through which I look at every single aspect of my day. How I'm going to spend my time, where I'm going to spend my time, faith, family. What can I do? What can I do as a citizen? Knowing what I know now, having the experience that I have, having the access that I have, what can I do to revive a sense of national identity? What can I do to make sure that my babies, who are 17 and 14, and they will forever be my babies, what can I do to make sure they have a country to inherit? And then looking at my own work, right? I don't walk around saying that I'm a victim. Again, I have many reasons to decry victimhood, but I've chosen not to be a victim. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to show my babies what it looks like to work hard and to build the kind of life that you can be proud of. And so those are the things that I honestly spend my time focused on. And it's so awesome to now be able to work alongside a candidate that for president who sees the exact same thing. And I honestly believe, again, we've been doing this now for maybe 12 weeks. And when we started off, I was the first person Vivek brought onto his team. And we started off polling at 0. Now we're at third place, tied for third place with the former vice president of the United States, doing better than the former ambassador, doing better than a sitting senator right now. How does that happen? And his momentum is only increasing. How does that happen? That we've already qualified with the 40,000 unique donors to get him on the debate and to get a really nice spot on the debate stage. Again, it's us focusing on the main things and continue to get in front of the people.
Okay, so you're working with Vivek Ramaswamy, right? Is that correct?
I am.
All right, I'm going to ask about that in a second because I've had dozens of friends tell me check this guy out, and I just haven't been inspired to. So I guess this is my inspiration to the introduction.
Yes, you will love
talking to the wonderful Kathy about it. Let me say this real quick, and then you could tell me why I should like him. So I versus Biden, and I can't vote in that because I'm a registered Republican, but I like RFK Jr. against Biden. I hope he wins. And a lot of the rhetoric that I was sharing with my audience as far as the PrEP Act and the liability shields, I think I helped a lot of people without telling people what to do, giving people this information. I have to be honest. People say, well, he's this, he's that. A lot of the stuff that I was able to educate tens of millions of views was from RFK Jr. He's done a great job for years to explain the facts of the liability shield. So I'm always grateful that he kind of shared that knowledge with me and I was able to pass it on, not personally, just like I watch videos and I take information. So I love RFK. I'm glad he's running and I'm glad he's challenging Big Pharma and Joe Biden. I'm glad DeSantis is challenging Trump. I'm not one of these people who says, oh, everyone should get out of the way. I'm like, that's to me the opposite of what should happen because I don't think Trump is entitled to this term. And I also don't think he really has done a good job over the last few years. So I think the reason everyone's running is because they smell weakness because he's been weaker. With that being said, I see DeSantis and Trump, they're close to neck and neck. Trump's above now. I think that's going to change. And then you have this guy who's making a lot of, splash on social media, Vivek Ramaswamy, who I've not watched any videos on. I've seen just little clips, but to be honest, I'm not really interested so far. No disrespect to him or, who he is as a person, but as a voter, it hasn't really brought me. Why should I care about this guy?
Because I followed you. I mean, I don't watch every single minute of what you do, but I followed you now for several years. And if you like me, if you would have voted for me, then I can only believe that you would do the same with Vivek. Here's why. I say to my family in closed circle that Vivek is the male Indian version of me, but with money. A lot more money. But I mean, just a guy of integrity. So for your audience, since you haven't really watched much about him, so you probably haven't talked to your audience about him, let me just give you a little bit of a bio, and then you can ask me whatever questions on policy wise and all of that, and we can talk about it. But just from a bio perspective, he graduated summa cum laude from Harvard with a molecular biology degree, moved on to graduate in the top of his class from Yale Law School with his law degree, moved on to start multi-billion dollar companies. One of them, Roivant, is the one that he, before he stepped down, he founded. In Roivant, he oversaw 5 different drugs that are now FDA approved, one of which there are children who 100% of them died before the age of 3, now taking his drug as a part of their regimen. 70% of them get to live normal lives, worked on drugs that have now been FDA approved for prostate cancer and everything in between. Then in 2020, we had George Floyd that happened, and his employees came to him and said, you need to make a statement in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. He didn't really know a lot about Black Lives Matter. You know, he's a scientist working on saving lives and wasn't really paying attention to the culture, but he went out to the website at Black Lives Matter. And before they had a chance to take it down, remember, they had their mission statement on their website, and one of their mission statement was to dismantle the Western nuclear family. And as a son of immigrants, he was born here in America, but his family came here with very little money, raised him and his brother. And Vivek often says, I grew up with privilege. Let me tell you, I grew up in a 2-family household who put an emphasis on education. That's privilege, right? And so he recognized that, you know, an organization, Black Lives Matter, if their mission statement is to destroy what he considered to be privilege, that's not a good recipe. So he refused to take the knee to Black Lives Matter. And all of a sudden, his board members started resigning, his employees. It was a big brouhaha, and he had to make a decision of whether or not he was going to continue to remain there and to see his company that he has started begin to take so many hits, or if he would step down. He decided to step down from a multi-billion-dollar company that he founded, went on to write a number of books. One of them is Woke Inc. that I have here on my desk now, New York Times #1 bestseller, a lot of different things. And then he says to himself, I can continue being a talking head, or what more can I do? And this is his what more, running for president. And again, we've been doing this now for about 3 months, 12 weeks, and he is now tied for 3rd place. And while DeSantis is falling in the polls, Vivek is getting some of that share, because there's people like yourself listen to him, pay attention to what he's saying. The fact that he's the one with real ideas, they're becoming very interested in that.
I'll check out some more of his stuff. I'd even be willing to chat with him. But I saw, he was a big pharma CEO, which I don't ever hold people accountable for their jobs and stuff. But to me, big pharma is such a huge topic, and I've heard, he's been challenged on that a few times. But I think
Have
that
you ever taken an aspirin? Have you ever taken an aspirin?
Yeah, but I'm not too big on it.
I know, but that's big pharma, right? Have you ever gone? I mean, so we can't have a blanket that we put everyone. If you've ever worked in big pharma or biotech, then that means you're evil. We can't do that. And I know that you're not. But to help our listeners, especially those who may be a little bit more gullible than others, to fall for, well, if they're big pharma, then that means that they're a part of COVID. He's not. Again.
Right. I want to say this though, with big pharma, and even, I think Trump is too weak on this. I think RFK is good on it. I think DeSantis is better, but big pharma has swallowed up the food supply with the Bayer Monsanto merger that the Trump administration, I would say Attorney General was not able to stop. They now control a lot of the food supply. Every commercial, I just watched the NBA, it's pharma, 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 pharma. And then the commercial is for a pill. And it says, if you had the vaccine, talk to your doctor. Why? Well, why? What does that do? I don't know why.
I retweeted that when I saw you. I mean, because it's right. I mean, it is horrible. The FDA is. It's horrible. The FDA of today is the exact same FDA of almost 20 years ago. That is the reason why we had an opioid epidemic in this country, and it was really just to line the pockets of big pharma as well as the FDA. And it's the exact same thing. So when the FDA and the CDC and everyone else came out saying you have to take this jab, I'm like, wait a minute.
Right.
This is the exact same FDA of 20 years ago that told people that is responsible for the opioid epidemic that we had in our country.
They've swallowed up the television. They've swallowed up government. They've swallowed up both parties. They always give $1 million donation for inaugurations, and Trump took $1 million from them. Bobby Kennedy talks about this a lot, where Trump he knew about injuries and was really looking to expose it. But then after that, he kind of flopped like a fish, and he hired Alex Azar to run HHS, who's a pharmacy executive, and he hired Scott Gottlieb for FDA. So my big thing, whether it's any candidate, is who are you going to hire? Because if Trump and DeSantis talk really beautiful, but Trump hires Mitch McConnell's wife like he did last time and a bunch of pharmacy lobbyists, that's a huge issue for me, because I think big pharma is swallowing up not only culture, mainstream stuff, government, food. Like, this is a huge, huge issue for me. So not to demonize somebody for working for big pharma, but I think that Bobby Kennedy is really setting the precedent of what it looks like to take a stand against what they're doing, not to be anti every pharmaceutical. I don't think very many people are that, maybe some, but not many, but to really take a stand where the truth is, Biden might as well not even be there. He's a nothing. Trump did a terrible job and shows no signs of changing. DeSantis did a better job than Trump, and Bobby Kennedy does a better job than DeSantis. So my question is,
but Bobby Kennedy may be good on some things, which he is, and I agree, especially on medical freedom, right? But he's horrible when it comes to fossil fuel, and fossil fuel is just as important as any other conversation that we're going to have. In fact, energy equals life. And if you don't have cheap, reliable, replenishable energy, go look at any third world country, right? And so Bobby Kennedy may be good on some things, and we can all agree. But then there are other even more weightier topics that we need to talk about that he's horrible on, right? So we need to be clear about that. And likewise with DeSantis, again, not demonizing anyone, just paying attention and putting a spotlight on facts, is that, when we had Silicon Valley bank bailout, he was strangely quiet about that. And then you begin to look at who some of his major donors were. It were some of the talking heads I saw on Fox News who were saying we need a bailout of Silicon Valley because that particular donor was very much tied into how the government responded in bailing out Silicon Valley. So one, we need to recognize that we're not going to, Jesus Christ is not on the ballot. So no one's perfect. So once you realize that, then you begin to, okay, breathe. Everyone's not perfect, right? But then let's have honest conversations about, what do we believe as a nation, right? And why do we believe these things are important? Right? And then let's begin to look at what policies people are saying they will support. And when you look at, you can go to Vivek2024.com, Vivek 2024.com, and you can see he's already put out 25 different policy positions that no one is having this conversation. Now DeSantis is, because Vivek had it first, which one, we need to secure our border. And building a wall is not enough, right? We need to use our military to secure our own border. No one was having that, right? We need big ideas in order to rein our country in and to set this ship straight. We don't need more plastic politicians who have spent a lifetime in politics, because you're not going to get anything authentic because they are beholden to the donor class. Right now, Vivek is funding his own campaign. And so he's not walking around. I've seen it myself. He's not walking around with a tin cup beholden to big dollar donors who will then come back and tell him what he can and cannot say. If you see someone who's been in politics longer than a year, you need to be real suspect of whether or not, they say one thing, but how realistic are they going to be to get it done? Another policy idea you don't hear anyone talking about.
Yeah, real quick, because I know you interrupted me to push your campaign, which is fine, but I agree with you on RFK and Bobby Kennedy shortfalls. But I'm on Vivek's Twitter right now, and it says Biden says all adults will be vaccine eligible by May 1st. That's good news. Give credit where due. I don't think that's good news. I think Trump and the Biden administration rushed it. I think it was corrupt. And if real quick, because you interrupted me, I get it. You're selling a campaign, but I'm doing journalism. I don't think it was good. I think it was rushed. I think it was a scheme for big pharma. I think both administrations were in on it, and I think Vivek's like a generic pharma guy who's never going to talk about the PrEP Act or the liability. So I'm not really interested in someone that can't call that out, because you can't keep an economy afloat if you can't even keep the country open because you can't stop the big pharma tyranny. So I just, I understand that there's shortfalls to DeSantis and all the other candidates, but yeah, I can't trust this guy any less personally.
Okay. Now, when was that dated? The tweet that you just read? What's the date?
2021, so it was a year
Yeah.
and a half after
People
lockdowns.
grow. People grow. And Vivek has talked about it extensively. He's been doing all of the typical ways of getting the message out. He's very clear. I took both. He said he took 2 vaccines. DeSantis won't say if he took the vaccine or not. Vivek said, I took it. I listened to my government. But he also said, I think he was on Glenn Beck when he made this, when he was talking about this, knowing what I know today, I would not have taken either of them, right? And so he's been pushing back against what the government did with the lockdowns, with the vaccines. He doesn't trust it. He doesn't agree. Most people weren't like you and I, right? I mean, very early on, I came to the very quick decision, I will not be taking these vaccines because they're experimental and I don't fall in the risk groups, right? So why do I need to take these vaccines? Or my children, you and I are now looking like geniuses, right? Compared to some. But there were a number of others, who believed their government. Go figure. Who did not believe that their government would be insidious in any way or underhanded, and that this was really for the good of the country. There were a lot of people. I don't distrust that initial assessment. Now, 3 years later, if someone is walking around talking about you must get vaccinated, that's something completely different, right? And so I think early on, Vivek, like many others, were in the bucket of, why would our government lie to us? This seems plausible. You had a number of people who were pushing it. You and I didn't fall for that. But now, after some time and looking at the information, you're like, wait, I disagree with all of that. That was a mistake. If I could go back, I would have never done it. And I think that's commendable to have leadership who could say, I wasn't right on this. I want to do something about it and do something different.
And I think that's I hear what you're saying. I agree. I think that's where Trump is losing me, because even DeSantis, same story, right? Didn't do what I thought was right, but then is willing to say, I have more information now. And I'm not hearing that so much from the Trump side. And, this is where, at least with my platform, say someone like Ted Cruz, a year and a half, like probably a few months after what Vivek said, or however you say his name, I apologize if I mispronounced it. But Ted Cruz tweeted that we need to take masks off of vaccinated Americans. This was a month and a half after lockdown. And some people will say to me, like, you're going too hard at Ted. He was just trying to help out. And I'm thinking to myself, he's trying to help out people who got the vaccine. I take offense to that personally, just because I feel like you're trying to dehumanize me, where it says, if you took the vaccine, you get special goodies and privileges. What good is a Republican Party that can't even keep the country open, can't even stop socialism, prints all the money, lies about the inflation that they helped cause, and then a year and a half later, they're ready to strip my rights because I didn't comply to big pharma? And that's the type of stuff that I see with Ted Cruz. So I agree with you. I'm glad you called out Bobby Kennedy and DeSantis, because these aren't personal attacks against their character. These are policy attacks against what they do. And there's a fine line between, being classy, which you are, and then just letting people kind of keep fooling us on loop. So whether it's with Vivek, with DeSantis, with all of these people, I feel like sometimes the game they play is they point, and everybody just runs in circles arguing about the candidates. Meanwhile, they always kind of just cave. So I guess, how do you feel about that? Because some people will be like, you're going way too hard at him. And I'm like, dude, this is even more personal than any of the conversations or debates we're having. Because if you're literally going to look at me like Ted Cruz is a man, right? Look at me in the face and say, sorry, I'm just going to give rights to the vaccinated people and not you. Like, to me, that's high level betrayal and high level tyranny. So that's kind of where I'm at with challenging candidates. It's not simply about, I guess, changing the mind, but caving when America needed you most and not being able to really be with the people that were suffering.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. How do we do better? It's exactly what you're doing, right now, having dialogue. And the fact that you didn't agree with me on something that I said a few moments ago, and then I heard you, and then I offered another point of conversation, and instead of kicking me off your show and say I don't like her, let's not have her back on here anymore, she's ridiculous, but you said, you put out a question, you made a statement, I countered, you came back, I said something else, and now we continue the conversation. People, right? We have to have dialogue. If you tell people they cannot speak, and those are some of the red flags for me, right? That when the whole, I mean, since we're using the example of the COVID vaccine, is the fact that I couldn't even talk about it. If I said something, they wanted to shut me down, they wanted to bully me. Here I live in a very liberal area, they were hosting parties, and you couldn't come if you didn't have your vaccine card. Like, I wasn't a part of the cool kids club. It was just ridiculous, right? And it was all of these kind of red flags, forcing children to take it when you're looking at that the impact of this virus, even if they caught it, was negligible. Why would I mean, I get to read all the pamphlets for my children for every other vaccine, but now I'm just supposed to shut up, sit down, and do as I'm told, and inject an experimental vaccine into my children. So, but it's the fact that but those were red flags for me. The fact that I couldn't have a debate, I couldn't have a discussion. I just had to shut up, sit down, fall in line, or you're trying to kill granny, right? And so, but what you're doing and the example that you just showed, even when you and I may not agree, and you still may come out on the other side of this not agreeing with my view of Vivek, but still allowing for a conversation on a platform that you controlled. You could have booted me off, but you
Of
didn't.
course not.
And
Yeah.
so that's the kind of conversation we need to have. No one has absolute truth. I don't, you don't, but I do believe absolute truth exists. And I believe that it's our job to try to figure it out. And then once we figure it out, is once we come as close as we can to it in this moment, plant a stake. With the understanding you may have to uproot that stake because information changes and you may need to move it again. But we got to start standing for something and take the risk of looking like a fool on the other side of it. But planting your seed and being willing to speak it out loud. That's what we need to do in this country.
Speaking of that, I know you have a personal and interesting abortion story. I remember it from your campaign. If you wanted to share that, because I feel like it's super powerful, even to me, like your personal story on that.
Yeah. Remember I said earlier, if I wanted to decry victim, I could. I mean, there's so many different things, right? But I refuse to be a victim. I am so grateful. That is what floods my heart, is to be so grateful. I'm grateful to be an American. I'm grateful to have the family that I have, and I'm grateful to be alive. It wasn't guaranteed in my case. As you have alluded to, I am the byproduct of a rape. My mother was 11 years old when I was conceived. My father was 21. And my grandparents, I grew up in very rural Alabama. Talk about, again, obstacles, right? I believe a lot of how we live our lives is a choice. I grew up in the very deep south of Alabama. I grew up in a home with no insulation, no running water, an outhouse in the back, and a well on the side. I can see it in my mind's eye, even as I talk to you about it. I grew up extremely impoverished, and yet here's my mother, my grandmother, and my grandfather. They, obviously stood around my mom, and they saw value in my life. And I am so grateful to God that they saw value in my life. My mother talks about, certain members in the family who said, I need to be aborted or she need to get rid of me. And yet my family saw value in my life, and I was loved, and I didn't even know I was poor until I grew up. And then looking back, like, oh my God, that's so impoverished. And so I'm grateful. And I believe, me getting to the point, as I mentioned earlier, of deciding whether or not I was going to be bitter, that wasn't the first time I had to make tough decisions of how I was going to move in life. I have created a history, a pattern of getting to an obstacle and then choosing, how am I going to move forward? And I believe that's the mindset that we need in our country today to continue to move us forward. We are about to lose the greatest country when these miscreants in the back room begin to say out loud what you and I have been talking about for years, like, oh, let's talk about the gentler, kinder version of communism. There is no gentler, kinder version. Capitalism is not perfect. America is not perfect. I grew up in the deep South. I have the blood of slaves coursing through my veins. I could talk at length about my heritage. And yet, there is no one running a close second to this country, just like there's no other system, monetary system, running a close second to capitalism. We have history, centuries of history that tell us capitalism is the best thing going. Now, this crony capitalism, not so much because it's fake and we can point that out, right? But capitalism in and of itself, how do we get back to the pure form of that and allowing the people to decide what fails, what wins versus crony capitalism, where the government and other entities come in and kind of buoy up this false option as if this is really viable when it's not. So that's my story. That's why I am who I am. It's all a part. All of us, every single aspect of our lives have culminated to make you who you are today. And now I believe it's a choice of how we proceed. I have chosen not to be a victim, but to the best of my ability to see the better side of things and to focus on where do we go from here? What's next? What do I do next? And that is what has ended me on this campaign with Vivek.
I love the positive attitude and the optimism, and also extremely classy. I think there's a lot of ways you could take it, but I like that you're, taking the high road and just focusing on yourself and what you're doing. And I'm going to open the floor at the end for whatever you want to say, whatever you want to talk about, as long as you want to go. I appreciate you for coming on. And I want to say, during your campaign race, although we never spoke, I saw the great clips. I tried to elevate them as much as possible. And I'm here for that for any candidate, including the one you're working with. So if I see some good clips, some good information, the truth is the truth. And at the end of the day, I've heard from a lot of friends that your candidate is, starting to talk about things that aren't so stale. And people are tired of Trump versus Biden. People are tired of Trump telling the same stories for the last 7 years about himself. And, I think that, Vivek and Bobby Kennedy and even DeSantis to some extent are starting to, it's like, we can't just be stuck in a loop for 30 years. Like things have to evolve. And I think that competition is great. So it's great that he's competing. And also, like you were saying, bringing forth new ideas to then challenge Trump and DeSantis to hopefully get them to, even if they copy it or they change their policy because of it, that's a huge win for the base if it's moving in the right direction. So thank you for coming on. Floor is yours. Whatever you want, as long as you want, it's all you.
No, I think we've covered just about everything, unless your audience, if there's any questions popping up from your side of things. But thank you. And I remember you when I was running. My girlfriend says I'm keeping a secret list of people who showed up for me in those last 5 days. Again, didn't know you, had never met you. This is our first time even speaking. And yet I, every now and again, I would look up to see like what's going on in the world, because we were running and I had blinders on for the most part. But every now and again, I would look up and look around and I would see those who were out there fighting, not just for me, but for something real and authentic. And I believe that that's where we need to be. I believe I love my country. I want her to survive. She will not survive on the trajectory that we find ourselves in. There's no way we can survive. We were already, 3 million illegals came through last year, I believe. I may be wrong. Hopefully I'm somewhere in the ballpark. And those are just the ones we caught and identified. Put an exponent on the ones we have no idea who these people are who have come into our country, right? So now with the end of Title 42, put an exponent on the 3 million and then another exponent on it when you're talking about the ones we don't even come in contact with. How can a nation survive, right? And you have Democrats sounding a whole lot like Democrats of the 1700s, talking about, oh, we need these people to come in and pull up our crops. Sound a whole lot like the Democrats of slavery, right? where slaves were a part of their economy, and now they're bringing in people we don't even know. And when you listen to all of their takes, they're sounding a whole lot like Democrats of the of the days of slavery. And so I don't think we can survive continuing on. I think we need something different and something big and something bold that will kind of wake us up out of our stupor as a nation, and to stand the chance to fight against communist China, stand a chance to fight against globalism, stand a chance to fight against this transgender cult and this climate change cult that has taken over so much of our identity as a nation. We're going to need something bigger and bolder, and people with bigger and bolder ideas in order to get us on the right track. And so I'm all for that. I'm all about that kind of energy. Talk about legendary energy. I'm all about that. So thank you so much for having me on.
Last question real quick. Do you have a political ambitions to run again in Pennsylvania to perhaps get swooped up by whoever does win the Republican nominee for a position, whether it be even someone maybe you didn't run for? Like, is that in the cards, or you're just kind of playing it by ear?
In this cycle, it's a hard no. I am all about replicating what I did in Pennsylvania across the nation to get Vivek through the primary and through the general. That is my sole focus. Pennsylvania, I told you, you had one chance to get somebody good in office. I was that chance. Right now, you're stuck with Fetterman, and who knows what's going to happen with Bob Casey. But so this cycle, no. I'm focused, step one of reviving our nation and getting her off the precipice of destruction is to get somebody better in that White House. And so that's my focus. But who knows beyond that, right? I don't have a crystal ball. Who knows? Right now, I'm exhausted of the thought.
I got you. You're focused on the mission. And real quick, I got a super chat from Teresa. I will talk to Dr. Shiva within the next year. I'm sure of it. So thanks for the super chat. We'll chat. And Kathy, say it again. So I know Ramaswamy. I got the last name down perfect. How do you pronounce the first name? Because I say Vivek.
No, listen. We all had a difficult time because it doesn't flow with our phonics, right? But I have been hosting Vivek with Cake. Vivek. Okay. Right. So come meet Vivek with Cake to help Americans understand how he says it. But
luring me in with sweets. You're trying to put a cake out there so I come over and vote. No, but he's welcome on the show as well to have a conversation, debate. He could try to convince me as a unconvinced voter. I think that would be fun. I'll be on my best behavior. So if he wants to, that's cool. If not, it's all good. I'll definitely be following you on Twitter, Kathy for Truth, seeing what you guys are up to, and I will be looking into it, and anything that's great, I'll try to elevate it and help out.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, you're doing a really great job. Just what you're doing of allowing people you may not agree with, you may agree with, come on and have conversations. And I think that's what we need to learn to do again. Less talk, less debate.
Yeah, he's welcome on to chat, because at the end of the day, I want Joe Biden. I do not want him in office. I would like a Republican there, and I'm just past the point. I think after Trump, I really believed at a certain point that he might really pull off some cool grand finale, and I was wildly underwhelmed, not only with what he did, but who he's been afterwards. So that's really my main goal, is not to even with like the past and everything, people could go back to how I felt when I was 24 or 25. And, that's not what I'm doing. It's more just scrutinizing to make sure that we don't get played again. And I think everybody feels the same, probably including him, which is half the reason he probably ran. So if he wants to come on and work towards those goals and, chat about it, then he's welcome on. And I'm sure we'll chat again as well. Thanks for being here.
I love it. Blessings.
All right. Thank you so much, Kathy Barnett. Look her up, follow her on social media, and show some love. Thanks for being here. This has been the not Monday, because there's Memorial Day, Tuesday episode of Dream Rare Podcast. Thanks everyone so much for being here. Hey, what's going on, my friends? Just a few ways to stay in touch and support if you'd like to. The first way is dreamrare.com. We have blue beanies, black beanies, pink hats, other colored hats, freedom versus tyranny shirts, Stay Blessed long sleeve, God is Great long sleeve, and lots of more cool items coming soon. Dreamrare.com. Check out the shop to support. Everything's made in the United States. Handpicked by me. Patreon.com/raretalk. For $5 a month, you can help support me, support the show. If you haven't noticed, unlike other channels, I don't work with very many sponsors, sometimes none at all. And part of the way I'm able to do that is with the dreamrare.com shop and patreon.com/raretalk. So thank you guys for keeping the show free, unimpeded, uninterrupted. I'm forever grateful. My free email list is stayintouchwithme.com. So check the links below in the description or just type in on any browser, stayintouchwithme.com, all one word. You'll find my email list, put it in there, and it's the least annoying email list you'll ever be on. I barely use it because I don't like getting emailed every day or every week. It's annoying. So I don't do it. Stayintouchwithme.com. It helps me take back some power away from big tech. Telegram, t.me/dreamrarechat or @dreamrarechat. Due to censorship, I post all my live stream and videos there. Sometimes I have some bonus content, and I try to give people a heads up when Facebook or YouTube won't. DreamRareChat at Telegram. My Instagram is @DreamRare. Thanks for everybody following there for shorter content. And DreamRareLinks.com, that's DreamRareLinks.com, has all my stuff. My podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, my music on Spotify and Apple, my Rumble page, my BitChute and Gab page. All my links are found at DreamRareLinks.com. Thanks for watching, folks. God bless you. You already know I'll be back with more content soon.